if you don't have enough food, the body kind of prioritises what it gives the energy to. So whatever it is, this is food, and it's then trying to produce energy from the food that you're taking in. It then prioritises it, number one, to essential processes, particularly maintaining the brain function. Everything the body does is about maintaining the brain function primarily. Second thing would be reproduction, thermoregulation. You're going to feel tired. And third thing, obviously kind of putting on weight, storing energy. So it always, if it doesn't have enough energy, it kind of stops doing this, then stops doing that, then stops doing that. So we can see it's kind of signalling basically at this point, when the menstrual dysfunction's in place, to stop doing that. Stop producing the correct hormones which stimulate the menstrual cycle to work effectively. Does that make sense? So by reducing energy, you're influencing the hormonal status within the body, which influences the menstrual cycle. And when you influence that hormonal stuff, you're in particular affecting bone health, and that's kind of the female athlete triad in a nutshell. However, what about the effect on performance? It's actually a little bit equivocal whether you go into the science. Does it affect performance? Does it not? But this is a really interesting study which just shows probably the effect on the ability to adapt to the training that you do. So if you're training, you should get faster. Well, you better do, otherwise it hurts a lot for not much effort, I guess, or not much gain. So this was two groups of female swimmers. Interestingly, they did have some challenges actually in this group. So American female college swimmers, so decent. If you're a college swimmer in the States, you're a pretty decent athlete. So they had two groups. One of them was had adequate energy availability. One of them didn't. So we can see the two groups here. This is exercise energy expenditure in the dark here. This is energy availability here, and this is energy balance. And the same on this side, how much energy they're burning through exercise, how much energy is available, that availability, intake minus exercise expenditure, and energy balance. So these are in a negative energy balance of about 600 calories. That's about 2 Mars bars a day in food terms. So not a huge amount, but not a massive amount. The effect on their hormonal status of their menstrual cycle, you can see over the 12-week period of training that they looked at, you can see estrogen and progesterone changing as you would expect a menstrual cycle to do. In the group that had adequate energy, in the group that didn't, no real pattern of change whatsoever. They were able to do exactly the same training. So this is training distance, so distance they're swimming in the pool, swimming up and down on a daily basis. You can see the kind of periodization that the coach had put in place. They were able to do exactly the same training, no change in injury or illness or anything at that point. However, there was a big difference in how they adapted to the training. So these were 400-metre swimmers. They did 400-metre time trials before and after the 12-week training period. With the those who had adequate energy, they improved their performance by 8%, which is kind of normal in a 12-week training period in college swimmers. Those who had inadequate energy actually reduced their performance by 8%. So they almost didn't adapt effectively to the training. So they did all that work, the same distance, the same training, the same intensity, but in a time trial situation actually got slower. Seemingly, one of the reasons because they didn't consume enough energy to do that. So not consuming enough energy to allow the body to function effectively seems to decrease adaptation to training. Now, this is one study, so there's lots of caveats to that. Other nutritional factors in there. 3 of the higher risk things to cause menstrual irregularities. One is skipping breakfast. So if you go out of the athlete domain and go into the general population domain, skipping breakfast seems to increase the risk of menstrual issues. Poor quality food, so particularly eating really fatty, horrible food, that's why the burger and the onion rings and the chips are there, increases the risk of menstrual irregularities, menstrual problems, and low fat intake as well. So low fat, on the kind of flip side, High poor fat intake increases the risk of menstrual challenges. Low fat intake in general also causes higher risk of menstrual dysfunction. But I think that particularly for athletes, probably that one could be relevant. Low fat intake and skipping breakfast could be two aspects that would increase the risk of menstrual dysfunction. Now, there's all sorts of acute hormonal changes that come with changing, not having breakfast, things like leptin, which would decrease, for instance, which Michael talked about earlier in terms of that low fat. You could have a decrease in leptin just by skipping breakfast. So there's all sorts of things like that that could happen. It could also be that just by skipping breakfast, you're not actually getting enough energy in the day at a real simple level. You're cutting a meal out. So there's 500 calories gone in one foul swoop. So it could just simply be not then catching up throughout the rest of the day. But what about so there's that effect on potentially adaptation to training. What about the effect on performance? And I would say there's probably a big question mark on that. If you go into the science and the literature, it's 50-50 as to whether there is an effect on performance of decreased or menstrual irregularities or no menstrual function. My criticism would be a lot of those studies are not in elite athletes, as usual, in those things. So you could probably find studies that say it does and some that say it doesn't. So, in theory, these could be the decreases in performance or the effects on performance of those decreases in the hormonal response due to not getting enough food. So the premenstrual syndrome, I've got a few more bits on that in a bit. So these are the different aspects that could be there. Basically can affect a whole bunch of different aspects of your performance. Whole range of them. A couple of papers that were interesting though, and I'll kind of highlight a little bit. Where is there? Low estradiol, so low estrogen, seen to attenuate the anabolic response post-training. So if you have got menstrual irregularities, you can have decreased estrogen, probably a decreased testosterone due to that as well. So actually it could reduce the effect of going in the gym with Michael, potentially, and the effects you're trying to get through that. Just by those menstrual irregularities through potentially not consuming enough food. On the other end of the scale, for the endurance athletes, it will affect the fuel you use during exercise. So if you were going to the extreme, as if you're doing a marathon, sparing muscle glycogen is quite important. You need that to continue to exercise. We can see here, when estrogen's high, this is glycogen use. So when estrogen's high, you use less glycogen as a fuel. When estrogen's low, you use less fat as a fuel and more carbohydrate. So that could affect marathon performance, because if you're not sparing muscle glycogen, that's a bit of a challenge in an event like a marathon. So there is potential for these decreases in estrogen through to not getting enough energy to affect performance at both ends of the scale, but in different ways. No, I don't think so, because I think you're going to get a reduced anabolic response to the exercise. So in a very different way, it's going to have a very different effect, I think. But we talk about this kind of energy balance, energy availability. Do you know what? It's really hard to measure. It's great me saying you've got to get enough energy, but I don't think in kind of over 10 years of working with elite athletes I've ever really put anything in calories, because it's really, really hard to have a clue what to tell you. And there's two reasons why. One, energy out is really hard to measure. We can put all sorts of stuff around you, put armbands on, all sorts of, heart rate monitors, all sorts, it's really, really hard to measure. But energy in is fraught with errors as well. I can get you to a food diary, and I might get you to do a food diary to give an indication, but to get an accurate amount of calories off that is really hard. The variation is plus or minus 1,000 calories, incidentally. So given you're probably eating 1,200 to 2,500 in a day, that's massive. Errors in the tables that we use to calculate how many calories, and we'd never really take into effect the digestion. So if you have a processed meal, more calories, food will be absorbed than if you cook it yourself and it's higher in fibre and so on, so therefore slowly digested. If you grind nuts and kind of have them as a powder, more of the nutrients will be absorbed than if you just eat whole nuts, for instance. So actually the digestion is a huge, huge aspect of it. So therefore we're dealing with kind of two potential random number generators. You can do it in a lab, quite controlled, but you don't live in a lab. So we can't do that. But there might be some indicators along the way that we could measure and monitor. One is thyroid function. So T3 in particular seems to be sensitive to decreases in energy availability. This is that study earlier on where I showed the decrease in adaptation. This is the group who had adequate energy availability. This is the group that had inadequate energy availability. And you can see T3, thyroid function, seems to go down. The other is IGF-1 within the blood, also seems to go down. These two are really sensitive to energy availability and how much is there. So you kind of need a baseline, but it's something we could probably work with the docs to kind of monitor it, and it kind of is in the blood tests anyway, to kind of look at that. An easier one is actually resting energy metabolism. So kind of sitting down in the lab with a gas mask on before breakfast and just measuring resting metabolic rate. And this is a technique that's actually come from anorexia, real eating disorder challenges, where they use this as a marker of whether people are actually fueling effectively or not in that environment. It also seems to be sensitive. This is that same study again. And if you take the actual measure and you do it to a predicted measure, and there's some equations you use to predict resting metabolism and do it as a ratio, this is energy balance, this is in an energy deficit. So it's actually a simpler tool that might help us monitor things. And the third aspect is just body composition. Changes in body composition give us a good idea of energy in, energy out. If you get leaner, if you get lighter, that's a good idea you're not eating, or you've eaten less than you've burnt. On the flip side, if you get heavier and you get fatter, it's an idea that you've eaten a little bit too much. So we can use body composition measurements to help guide you as to whether you're eating or consuming enough. I think in terms of what we can't get away from, though, is that body composition has an effect on performance. This is actually some work that Joe's done, and this is for male athletes. We've done the data for females as well. He managed to get hold of some data on performance times and BMI in there. So what we can see is, depending on the event, generally the longer the distance, the lower your BMI, and there is a range within which you probably need to be for a BMI to perform effectively. So there is a performance effect. The chances, if you're outside of these bars, these error bars, 95% of the people who will win gold medal pace events in each of these times, 95% of the people will be within those errors. Now, that's quite a big ranges, so most people will be within them, but there is an effect on performance. So we can't hide from that. What we can do is just look at good processes, though, of good eating. When it comes to the practical stuff, it is just focus on quality, balanced meals. I know it kind of sounds boring, but balanced meals with a balanced plate between carbohydrates, protein and veg and salad really is going to help. And then just thinking about the timing of the food, the type of food and the total food. Now that's going to be very dependent on what training you're doing, because it's going to be very different depending on your event and the training that you're trying to do and trying to affect. Just to finish off though, some ideas around menstrual pain, some nutritional aspects that might help if you do get menstrual pain. 5 nutrients that seem to potentially have an effect on reducing menstrual pain and menstrual cramping. Calcium, so increasing calcium intake. Vitamin B6, omega-3 fatty acids, magnesium and polyphenols. So polyphenols are antioxidants. If you think of anything that says a superfood on it, it's probably got high in polyphenols. That tends to be how they talk about superfoods. So you can think of it in food terms, something like this: berries, cherries, milk for calcium, nuts and seeds for B6, mackerel or oily fish for omega-3s, green leafy vegetables for magnesium. Of course, we could supplement with each of those as well if we needed to, but there definitely are dietary sources we can look at. And then this morning, I was just doing a bit of preparation for this, just doing a little bit of final reading around, and I came across this study. Now, when my wife, once a month, not at the minute, she's 8 months pregnant, but previously, about once a month, she seemed to have a craving for chocolate. Wonder why. This was just an interesting study. At the point of the period, an increase in cravings for high-fat foods. I thought, what a fascinating thing to see, because that's what my wife craves once a month. So there is actual changes in your appetite and cravings throughout the menstrual cycle as well, which are probably going to affect your food choices as you go through. So I thought I'd finish on that, the fact that chocolate probably is just normal.